Hey, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Before we get started, there is a major shift coming to the channel come the beginnings of May, but fret not, I will be very active and streaming regularly on Twitch. So if you have not created an account yet and followed me over on my Twitch channel, that is Dark Spider David for the username. So it's twitch.tv/DarkSpiderDavid. We're currently holding a goal of 50 followers, so if you can help out with that by checking out the channel, checking out past broadcasts that I've done, and seeing if you like what you see, hit the follow button. You won't regret it. See you then. Your wallet is mine. Yes, I know we're closing in on a month of this review being late, but if Jeremy Jahns can make his late, then so can I. Especially now at the end of my rope here. But it is time to finally review Mortal Kombat 11. As you can tell, I got the Ultimate, or as it's called actually, Premium Edition. I get my Premiums and my Deluxes and my Ultimates all mixed up. They really need to settle on just one. But ever since Mortal Kombat 9, or as it's formerly called, Mortal Kombat, just plain and simple, which is primarily the reboot to the entire saga that is Mortal Kombat, one of the definitive titles within the gaming industry. It's actually the game that gave us this little square right here, actually, or at least one of them. I think Doom is also another player in that whole game, no pun intended. But Mortal Kombat is partially responsible for that little M you see on the corner of your video game boxes. And here we are, practically 20 years later, with a new iteration of the Mortal Kombat series. This time, they didn't do any kind of fancy titles, no subtitles, no nothing. It's just straightforwardly called Mortal Kombat 11. And if you're watching this review, as well as plenty of others on this game, you already have an idea of what Mortal Kombat is. At this point, thanks to the glory that is the internet and years upon years of mythology and the trajectory of the series, most people know what Mortal Kombat is and what it's most known for, most infamous for, that again gave us that ESRB rating system. So Mortal Kombat 11, here we are. And it's funny because growing up I wasn't huge on Mortal Kombat. I guess I was more leaning on Street Fighter, but at the same time, playing a devil's advocate, I feel like maybe it's because of how exposed I was, because of how graphic it was. Maybe my parents were able to safely kind of gear me away from that and more so into Street Fighter. That was more about the joy of sparring and defeating your opponent without the need of tearing out their spine. But then Mortal Kombat 9 came out, which is formerly called Mortal Kombat, the reboot to the entire series on PlayStation 3, becoming much more accessible to me after owning a PlayStation 3, and it was that game that made me go, that's why people love it. And sure enough, I was hooked. And it was a good way to kind of get people like me to jump back into Mortal Kombat, especially since that was the reboot of the series. So far as taking the entire story of at least the first 3 Mortal Kombats and jam-packing them into one cohesive story mode that was also ultimately able to make its own changes to reboot the franchise. Ever since then, I've been following Mortal Kombat with Mortal Kombat X, the DLC characters, the complete edition, and now here we are with Mortal Kombat 11. So as soon as it got announced, set my pre-order on, and knowing that there was a steelbook case, I got the premium edition that comes with the combat pack, and now here I'm to break it down that Mortal Kombat 11 is pretty good, but it's not great. Let's dive right in. My expectations for Mortal Kombat 11 were actually rather high. There was good cinematics, and there was an awful lot of prestige left on the ground after Netherrealm's last game, which was also a fighting game, but it was, to me, a much more personal one because it involved DC superheroes and some really great addictive combat gameplay mechanics that just had me hooked from the game that from the time that it was released even to a month in, where I kept revisiting, and that was Injustice 2. So I was thinking to myself that maybe if they were able to take the elements that worked for Injustice 2 and port them over to Mortal Kombat 11 after what they set themselves up for, Netherrealm's got another major hit with Mortal Kombat 11. Now, granted, I will admit that the marketing up until its release was a little unorthodox, with casting Ronda Rousey as Sonya Blade as opposed to a general voice actor, as well as some of the musical choices they had with some of their trailers and their mixing. But anyways, I took that all as just marketing ploys. I said to myself, well, Mortal Kombat is, as opposed to Street Fighter being a bit more Japanese oriented and Smash Brothers having a different genre, Mortal Kombat is more so a very Western property that is almost synonymous with gamers that like to get FIFA and Madden every year. Mortal Kombat kind of feels much more arcadey in that sense. So I'm like, okay, fine, it's just marketing. That's all it is. That's all what it really is. But as us and mainly other players started to actually play it, whether it be with the initial release or even the beta back in March, we started to notice that something was amiss. First of all, I don't know if it's just me, but I, for one, did not really like the menus of this game. I really preferred either the menus from Mortal Kombat X or Mortal Kombat 9 because there was just something, like I said, very welcoming about being brought back into the tournament and the world of Mortal Kombat. I gotta be honest, the menus in this game just kind of resemble something out of a mobile game. And at first I thought, okay, that's just superficial stuff. Nothing to really get up in arms about. It's just the fucking menus. But the whole mobile aesthetic might have been going deeper than originally conceived. But that's more so in the gameplay. Let's first talk visuals. I'm not exactly too friendly on the menus, as I just stated, but this is easily the best looking Mortal Kombat 11 to date. And primarily for one reason. They were able to take the very nuanced and realistic facial expressions from Injustice 2 and simply just pour them over and use that exact same technology into their Mortal Kombat characters and just have them be integrated here. And that's what makes these characters just so beautiful to look at. And granted, they went with much more realistic and more down-to-earth design for our characters, not only because their age plays a factor into there, but also let's just at least try to mature with the times, because there's no way that the designs for characters like Jade and Kitana and Sonya Blade and pretty much every single female character in the original not only the original Mortal Kombat games but also in the Mortal Kombat reboot from 2011 were going to fly in this new game. And to be honest, I'm quite thankful for that. So that's why we had really adjustable but really believable designs for these characters, and also for other ones that again mature with their personality. Johnny Cage, in my opinion, is one of the best designed characters in this game, not only because of his facial expressions but also because it matches the growth that he's developed over time. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. Same thing could be applied for characters, the signature characters like Sub-Zero and of course Boone's main, Scorpion. And it seems like Netherrealm is a rather technical team because not only did they excel on the visual parts but also on the audio. The soundtrack is great and the voice work is pretty up to par with most of the characters portraying them, even if they're not exactly the same exact voice actors from those original 90s and early 2000s games. They were still able to bring those characters to life. So people that are very much veterans of the series to somewhat late adopters like myself are going to appreciate how every character sounds and how they talk to one another. Except...
Hi.
We had this coming. This was coming. Miss Ronda Rousey. Oh, God. Yeah, I just could not pull myself away from simply just hearing Ronda Rousey reading lines in a sound booth. She sounds like she's in a sound booth, recording lines. And as a voice actor for either a movie, a television show, a cartoon show, or a video game like this, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to make it seem like you're in a sound booth. You want to make it sound like the character. And all I see in my mind's eye is Ronda Rousey in a sound booth. Let's try not doing that again. But on a subjective note, what could be considered worse or better to hear Ronda Rousey's line reading is also the practical sound effects, particularly for every single punch, kick, and blow landed in this game. Something that I took rather significant notice in Injustice 2, especially when characters were knocked through like walls and buildings and rubble and all that stuff. Same thing happens here in Injustice 2, and it even doubles down on it, especially when you hear those bones crack and that blood just gush. Like I said, depending on who you are, it could be either stomach churning or arousing. Alright, now let's get serious. Let's talk gameplay, because there's not much depth in the gameplay when it comes to angles of it, because it's a fighting game, so I can't talk about it like I would with like an RPG or an action adventure, third-person shooter, etc. It's a fighting game, side fighting game, the traditional way that you expect Mortal Kombat to be. However, what's really the catharsis of Mortal Kombat that makes it appealing for so many people in not only the West States, the United States, but also some people overseas, wherever it's not banned, is how every character plays and every character's style and how you kind of adopt to each character's styles depending on their back kicks, their forward punches, etc., and how you're able to combine everything together. And that's where the depth truly lies. And quite frankly, that whole game, that polished gameplay that you know about Mortal Kombat most recently in the past couple of games ever since 9 and X, is kind of ported over here. Now, personally, I don't know if it's just me, but there were some characters that I immediately got hooked on, especially with some of the quicker characters like Cabal. And there were some mid-range ones where I'm like, okay, every so often I'll dabble with this guy. In my opinion, I ended up enjoying Johnny Cage's fighting style more so than I was expecting to. And Scorpion and Sub-Zero they were my mains in earlier games, well, in some of the past couple of games like X and 9. Here, they kind of took more so of that mid-tier where I'm like, I'll jump into them for variety ever so often. But man, there were some other characters that I could just not get a grip on, no matter how hard I tried. So when the story mode kind of forced, or certain other modes in this game were kind of forcing me to play as these characters, I was like, oh, I'm going to be here all day, because I could not for the life of me grab a hold of the style of characters like Devora and Katana. I don't know, I really hope this doesn't come across as maybe discriminate, but there was, for the majority, the female characters were the ones I was having trouble most with, the way how agile and how they were using kind of like the air around them to maneuver themselves, as opposed to just punching and kicking moves to string together combos as some of the more male characters, even the quicker ones. And that was, again, just a personal thing. I don't think that's ever a right or wrong approach to it. I just think that that's something you should go into if you have not already picked up and played this game. And Netherrealm was also able to throw in a few added bonus gameplay mechanics to make Mortal Kombat 11 stand out from its predecessors. Most notably, some different recoveries, some different combos, different styles, how you're able to kind of change out certain special moves, like Scorpion being able to breathe fire, but then able to kind of like rush attack a character coming from behind and flame them up, and then using his Scorpion tail in a different way, and then of course adding those little counters to be able to string together even more moves and get like an extra move booster out of the move that you're currently playing, and stringing together all those things. Practice makes perfect, of course, but it's really satisfying when you're able to pull some of these moves off together and have your character bouncing back and forth. And if you're the one that's being bounced back and forth, then it's at least awe-inspiring to at least look, even if you're the one losing. And of course, you also got the Fatal Blow mechanic, replacing the X-rays from the previous two games, where this time there's no X-rays. You sometimes take a peek at the character skeleton bones being crushed to powder, so the visuals don't exactly hold back, and I'll get into the fatalities in a second. But these Fatal Blows do something very interesting, albeit a little cheesy at times, but for the most part they work because it gives you an upper hand should you be the one to lose. The only way to garner a Fatal Blow ability is to be able to have, I think, about 25 or less than 25% of your health at some point in the match. However, the catch is that once you use your Fatal Blow, can't use it in the rest of the match, so it's a one-time thing, so you better utilize it wisely. That's a little bit where the strategic things come into play. However, there's different modifiers in certain modes of the game that will allow either you or the opponent to use more of those Fatal Blows, so keep that in mind. In terms of what they exactly do for the other opponent, they're pretty much the X-rays, except they last a little longer and they deal some extra damage. It's a good way to turn, like I said, turn the tide in your favor should both of you be at around 25% health and you just want to get the edge over the other character. It's funny because when people were reacting to these things on the internet, a lot of people consider them to already be fatalities because of how brutal they are. But no, those are not the fatalities. The fatalities are what come after, especially with the character reveals, which this game does an even much more gruesome and graphic way to display them. The fatalities in these things are, again, I wish I was a fly on the wall in the boardroom when they have the meetings to get together and design these fatalities, because once again, they are the stuff of somebody's nightmares. For me, I just have a ball with them, performing them. Some are better than others, like in almost every single Mortal Kombat game. Every so often, there's that one fatality where they get so over the top and creative that there's some fatalities that are still technically bloody and gruesome in this game, and I was still thinking to myself, that was kind of basic. that was kind of generic. Like, you couldn't have done something differently except just beheading him again. Yeah, we've gotten to that point. The fatalities are going to make up most of your finishers when you want to wrap up a match in a very bombastic style. There are some brutalities where you can do the classic uppercut and chopping somebody's head off and then doing a couple of other things depending on the character. However, you can argue that this is where Mortal Kombat 11's original personality, gets kind of drained out. I appreciate the redesigns for some of the characters, particularly the females, but let's have a little bit of fun. Let's bring back those babalities or the friendships. Let's go a little nutty, especially when we want to pull some of this stuff off that we know we can't perform in story mode because you have a story to tell. At least let us have it in other modes, you know what I mean? Like some other things to make things much more fun and interesting. And I guess I'll use this in a segue because I mentioned that it depends on the character what their brutality is going to look like. The roster makes up of 23 or 24, I think it's 25 characters, a couple of, give and takes depending on whether or not you got the combat pass or you pre-ordered to get Shao Kahn. And for the most part, you got your mains, you got Scorpion, of course, you have your characters that you're never going to make a Mortal Kombat game without, and then you have your others that are either brand new to the series or they just haven't been around for a while and they're barely returned, like Noob Saibot that so many people loved. For the most part, the roster is good. Of course, there's going to be moments where you wish you could play as the character, especially when that character pops up in story mode and you fight him, but you can't play as him. So that happens again here, and there's not much more that I can really tell you except that here's hoping that in 12 we get some of those characters making a return, and then others get kind of swapped out so that they can get their fair share of the limelight. Which brings me to said story mode. One of the things that the Mortal Kombat series, especially since the reboot, has kind of taken pride in is having an epic story mode. And I guess I'll say not just with Mortal Kombat, with the Injustice games as well from Netherrealm, they pride themselves in including a very thoughtful and deep and rather lengthy story mode for their games. Usually when you think of a story mode for a fighting game, it's only like 2, maybe 2.5 hours. This thing goes on for like a good 5, almost 6 hours. So you got to know that you might not be able to beat it in one sitting, and if you are, you're a madman or woman. So these are lengthy story modes that are meant to be much more fleshed out than your traditional fighting game. And that generally ends up being true for the past Injustice and Mortal Kombat games. Personally, I didn't think that this was necessarily one of the best story modes to come out of Mortal Kombat, especially because it feels like we're kind of retreading old ground with this time travel mechanic that is incorporated into the story as a main plot device, because that was kind of the whole premise of Mortal Kombat 9, was that we were jumping back in time, Raiden was jumping back in time, and that's how we were kind of revisit those first 3 games through different series of events. Mortal Kombat 11 kind of does the same thing, while at the same time tying a little bit to what we were left off with in X, with some interesting cliffhangers and characters going in different directions that you weren't expecting. This kind of retreads that a little bit with characters going in directions that you weren't expecting, dealing with certain characters being offed, but then also kind of sort of coming back in a different way that might be, for the most part, divisive amongst the Mortal Kombat community, and then dealing with, again, time travel and then timelines in a somewhat convoluted way that I don't think was fully thought out through. That it's like, maybe if this was a 10-hour story mode experience, maybe it would have been explained a little better, but because they know that they can't keep us in a story mode for longer than like 4 or 5 hours when the main core gameplay style of the entire thing is just fighting and not like an RPG where you get to like explore things, then that's where the crutch kind of comes into play with that. So I gotta be honest, in Mortal Kombat 11, the story mode feels more of an excuse to show off the really beautiful facial animations and characters talking to one another and again expressing genuine emotion through their faces, the way that Netherrealm was able to really polish ever since Injustice 2. And then have some cool fights of like, what if so-and-so were to fight against so-and-so, and so on and so forth, and kind of string everything together. Leading up to once again, another bitchy, spammy final boss. Ed, you just can't help yourself, can you? The story mode, not exactly one of the best that Mortal Kombat has offered. So let's talk about some of the other modes. Maybe not most of them, but a good half of the others that I didn't talk about yet are some of the more traditional standard Mortal Kombat modes you've come to expect. You have Classic Towers, which is pretty much just a tower of randomized enemies. Each one may or may not have modifiers depending on the difficulty, and then once you reach the end, you get a character ending that is different from the ending of the basic story mode, depending on which character you play it as. And these I really like because I really like those endings. They're different, they have the voiceover, they're not cinematics, but you have like a cool little animation kind of moving around, but there's something about them that just feels a little nostalgic, kind of takes me back a little bit to not just Mortal Kombat, but other fighting games. In the competitive aspect, you got, like I said, Versus, where you get to fight locally, Tournament, online, where you got King of the Hill and different kind of matches. You create your own lobby with your own set of rules, yada, yada, yada. The standard mumbo jumbo that you would expect out of Mortal Kombat. As well as other modes and facets of the game that don't necessarily have to do with fighting. Of course, you got your collection section where you get to explore the different things that you acquired in the game, like story cinematics, the classic tower cinematics, the music of the game, art, concept art, different little things that you can kind of maneuver from the game that you can kind of look at. And then, of course, you got your tutorial. Now, the funny thing about this game, it's got a really in-depth tutorial that I was just not expecting. You got your basic section, but then you got this other section where the game will even analyze the frames it takes to perform a move. Yeah, okay, sure. Then there's another mode that's called AI mode, where it's pretty much like a strategy game where you take characters and you set up either an attack team or a defend team, and they're just simulated fights of the computer kind of fighting with each other. But of course, each character is not necessarily the basic form of that character. It's a much more upgraded one, and more on that later. I gotta be honest, this mode did not need to be here. I mean, it's not bad. It's a good way to earn some of the bonus collectible things in the game, but I want to fight. I don't want to just simulate fights with these make-believe fighters, attacking my defense team and then my attack team fighting somebody's defense team. The only little thing that I found kind of cool is that these fights could also happen while you're not gaming. Like, I can log back into the game right now and then it'll say, oh, somebody attacked your team, but you actually are the one that won. Congratulations, you earned yada yada. I'm like, okay, thanks. Then you have Towers of Time, and I wanted to save this mode towards the end because this is where a little bit of the controversy and the little ominous kind of things happening behind the scenes of this game start taking more form. Towers of Time are pretty much like a revamped version of those planets. You had the multiverse planets you had in Injustice 2, and each event had characters that you had to fight, and every time you fight these characters and you complete each event, or in this case a tower, you earn collectibles, whether it be coins, shattered shards, or whatever the hell, the time crystals, and then hearts and all this other stuff. A bunch of currency that's inside the game, as well as other loot like customizable gear for your characters, which was, in my opinion, my most anticipated aspect of this game leading up to its release, was the customizable gear, because that was the most addictive thing that I found in Injustice 2, was playing those planets, getting through those events, getting through the story mode, fighting other people online, and earning as my reward parts for the armor, parts to customize my own version of Superman, my own version of Batman, and each part came with a perk. Added strength, added health, added defense, and you get to mix and match to develop the perfect fighter. Let's go. Totally not what happened here. First and foremost, the Towers of Time, as of this recording, have not yet been fully polished. They've made some refinements with some updates, but the biggest controversy was that these things are just too damn hard. There's no Tower of Time that is less than medium. They're all at medium difficulty, hard, or very hard. There's no easy to just kind of course through and, grind a little bit. You have to grind all these other ones, and even then, the loot that you might be earning from may not be fully worth it. Then you get to that loot that you get to add to your customization. The customization is in no way, shape, or form the way I remember it from Injustice 2, because every time you earn a piece of gear for your character, which mostly makes up 3 pieces of gear per character, as well on top of the skins where you get to change the color of your character, as well as what their fatalities are, what their intro is going to be when they enter the match, as well as what their special movesets are that you can kind of string together 3 in different slots, etc. So many systems here, but the 3 primary that I want to focus is that gear that you get to customize, which is where my addiction came from in Injustice 2. You earn it. Now you have to keep that on, fight as that character over and over to unlock a socket in each gear, and each gear's socket you can put in an augment, and that augment will then boost a particular ability of that character, which means after already earning a cool looking piece of gear, I now have to, put it into Scorpion and now play as Scorpion over and over until those pieces of gear level up. Which means that when you earn that piece of gear, it just looks cool. It doesn't have an added strength or added, defense or added anything. Then I don't want to play anymore. That's where Injustice 2 had me hooked, was because it already came with that strength and that thing. So I was like, I want to play because I know from the offset that gear is going to be cool depending on what the color the gear was in. If it was gold, it was purple, it meant that it was rare or that it was common, etc. You kind of get a sense of that gear, but again, the gear, I know from the get-go that's not going to have any perks, because now I have to equip it to my Scorpion and play it over and over. I just don't have that kind of time. Ah, you don't? Well, then there is the Crypt. The Crypt returns in this game, which does a little cool thing at the beginning to pay homage to the legacy of Mortal Kombat, particularly in the movies. That was pretty cool. I'm not going to spoil it. But once you jump into the Crypt, two things happen. One, Netherrealm, are you interested in making a third-person action game? Because I think that you might have the assets and the talent to do so. Just don't overwork them like the rumors that have been circling around. That's got me a little guilty of playing this game from the beginning. But then the second thing that happens is that you realize that the Crypt is not just this one singular linear area to explore these treasures and open up these crypt boxes and try to gamble away the currency that you earn in this game, which, by the way, the currency is kind of nuts, because for almost every single thing that you do in this game, you earn coins. Granted, it may not be the most bountiful amount of coins, but you earn either coins or you earn soul fragments or hearts, and one can be used in the other. They're mostly used in the Crypt, but then the time crystals can be used in the specialty shop. There's just way too many currencies to keep track of. But the primary one that you, I guess, want to look out for is the coins that you can spend in the Crypt. And it's in the Crypt where you gamble away these coins to determine which chests you open to get those pieces of gear if you don't want to fight. From what I could tell, I mostly got concept art and skins. Meaning you could change the color of how Scorpion's gonna look, but in terms of the pieces that I want for the characters that I'm good at, it took a while, because more often than not, I found myself getting brand new pieces of fan gear for Katana and other characters that I know I can't play well as. And even then, I know that gear is not gonna do jack shit unless I keep playing as that character over and over, so it just cancels itself out for me. And that's where my heart broke, because that was the point from the beginning. It was a Kaiser Soze type of moment where it's like, so that's why people were saying that this game can technically cost $6,000, is because if you don't want to do all this grinding that I was faced with, and all of this gambling away of the in-game currencies, which are too many to count, no pun intended, then you can just buy it all with microtransactions. It's time to pour a cold one for Mortal Kombat. And I feel bad for saying that, because Mortal Kombat 11 is still a very well-polished fighting game. The core mechanics of what makes Mortal Kombat fun, from how you're able to attach yourself to a character, maybe not from a story perspective, because this ain't necessarily one of the best stories in the Mortal Kombat pantheon of games, but from a gameplay perspective, from a fighting game perspective, you're able to look at characters and go like, that's my main, that's my character, and still have that tournament feel with your friends, whether it be locally or online. And then, of course, you got impressive visuals that keep up with the tech that Netherrealm was able to produce, as well as, of course, the notoriety of the Mortal Kombat games, which is, of course, the fatalities, which still bring a smile to my face. It's just a shame that we're already starting to see little seeds planted of what could be the downfall of Mortal Kombat if they are not careful, because when it comes to these big AAA games, corporations I find it very easy that when they're top dog and they catch, really, one success after another, like Netherrealm's did with not only the Injustice games, but also the more recent Mortal Kombat games, maybe Mortal Kombat 11 is their first step in the wrong direction, and I'm hoping that they wake up before it's too late. So though I'm not going to fully say that I regret buying Mortal Kombat 11, it's definitely not the highlight of the year that I was expecting it to be, so I'm going to be giving Mortal Kombat 11 a low 8 out of 10. I was hoping to get hooked and addicted just like I did with Injustice 2, and I actually rather revisit Injustice 2 than to keep playing this game or just move on to the next thing that I have on my backlog. And that's very disappointing. That is very disappointing. Even though this is technically still a really good game, and if you're a Mortal Kombat fan, you should definitely pick it up. But maybe, towards the back half of the year when it starts to dip down to either $50, which I think it already did at one point, or even $40 later, closer to the holiday season. So thank you guys for watching my very late review of Mortal Kombat 11. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have played the game, and if you have not, are you down to spend the money for it, or are you going to wait for a sale, considering the heftiness of the currency system and the microtransaction debacle that's going on behind the scenes, as well as a little bit of an investigation going on at Netherrealm. Personally, I do feel a little guilty playing the game now because of things until they get cleared up, but that's just one man's opinion. Let me know yours in the comments. Like and share. Make sure to follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/DarkSpiderDavid. I actually streamed this game back when it initially came out, and I'm looking forward to streaming other games on there. So twitch.tv/DarkSpiderDavid. Link is in the description, and I'll see you guys there. Bye-bye.